breakers.
Yeah.
And then the governor will pass a bill saying no more water breaks allowed.
Yeah.
Rules allowed. So it's inherently a battle between progressives on the ground, not just in cities, but on the ground.
Yeah.
And a really pretty right-wing state government.
So here's the question I have for you. I think that the Texas GOP has done a phenomenal job captivating the Latino base of voters in Texas by hyper-focusing on social issues. And I think that the Democratic Party has also simultaneously alienated Latino voters by not focusing on things that they care about in terms of their material necessities. One thing that I always talk about, I want to run this by you basically. One thing that I always talk about is I think a very informative Pew Center research study that they conduct regularly on Latino voters. Obviously, it's not monolithic. You have, especially when you look at like Cuban or Venezuelan voters, like they break very differently. But Latino voters consistently outside of that overwhelmingly are in support of big government initiatives, which is like a very negative way to frame that.
Taxing the rich.
Yeah.
Making sure that people's child care and health care gets paid for, that people get paid what they deserve at work.
Even in the demographics that you would never expect that, like the plus 65 demographics, Latino voters still are way more in favor of progressive economic policy initiatives than every other demographic in the country. Obviously, young Latino voters, that's why they were very pro-Bernie, and that's a big part of how Bernie won.
In some of the areas that folks have said where we're losing Latino voters in South Texas is actually where we've taken Bernie most recently, where he's most popular.
Yeah.
And I think I agree in your core premise, but there's just a few facts that I think are important for folks to know. Latino voters in places like Texas primarily aren't Republican or Democratic, they're non-voters. They're folks overwhelmingly who have been spewed all this information. They're like, ¿sabes qué? Everybody's pretty much the same. What's the point of getting involved? And we've got to deliver people the goods. Then, as far as voters go, they're still generally voting for Democrats, but we're losing a lot of people, and it's especially amongst working class voters outside the big cities.
Yeah.
And you're right. The Republicans have focused on culture war issues. The Democratic response gets highlighted in the media. It makes it look like we're focused on those issues when we really should be saying we care about taxing the rich, making sure your schools are well funded, making sure folks have health care, and support the union movement, which Latinos have really been leading in Texas for a really long time. And I think that's what brings people back. San Antonio, where I represent, people said, oh, you're way too far to the left for this heavy veteran community, a place usually with more conservative elected officials. When I go and talk to those voters at their doors, they're more progressive than many Austin voters because they care about saying, why does Elon Musk get away with all this stuff and I work 50 or 60 hours a week and can barely get by? And so making those connections and picking those fights is really important.
That's the most consistent thing I've seen with like door knocking when I was knocking on doors for Bernie Sanders is that like voters are mostly disaffected. They just they don't feel like either party represents their interests. And I feel like the Democratic Party could actively bring a lot of these people back into the fray and even pull some of the people who might have even been caught up in this radicalization wave of like culture war phenomena, culture war issues and whatnot, and say like, no, we're going to get you the goods. We are going to genuinely solve your problems. This is something that I talk about with respect to Texas specifically. Like everybody always talks about like, oh, Texas is going to turn blue, Texas is going to turn blue. Like I don't necessarily think so, especially because like a lot of the people that are coming into Texas from my state are oftentimes the most insane, like, right-wing, reactionary weirdos that go to Texas, and, like, the native Texans are significantly more progressive than they are, but, there is always a new crop of people coming in that are going to vote for right-wing initiatives. But overall, a lot of these disaffected people would be more interested in participating in politics.
We've identified nearly 1 million never Greg Abbott voters in the state that the Democratic Party and campaigns never talk to. They don't vote. We don't talk to them. It perpetuates folks not voting and participating. We should go and listen and go and hear what people have to say. And that's really how you flip the state, not just to a blue state, but to one that actually helps those folks and lift working people up, because we're becoming such an unequal place, again, with folks like Elon Musk and other people moving their operations to Texas because they think it can be their playground. I think it can be sort of the epicenter of solidarity and showing what organizing in the South can look like. The South used to be a more progressive place. President LBJ from Texas signed Medicaid into law, signed the Voting Rights Act into law, signed Head Start into law, signed the Civil Rights Act into law. we can get back there.
Okay, I like that. So is there any active initiative? Do you sometimes feel like it's a lost cause in terms of like the way the Democratic Party has to manage the limited amount of funds that they have? Like, are they focusing enough? There are certain things like I don't know how contentious you can be, and while I find myself seemingly agreeing with Nancy Pelosi quite a bit recently with respect to what happened with like swapping out Biden, putting Kamala in, and even actively petitioning for Waltz to be the VP. There was one moment where Henry Cuellar was going up against Jessica Cisneros, where I feel like the Democratic Party took a major misstep and defended the incumbent in that situation instead of pushing out a problematic incumbent with a federal investigation being conducted on him at the time. I feel like that to me spells that like there's business as usual politics within the Democratic Party. Is that going to change anytime soon? Do you feel like there's active decision making in that regard?
Look, I don't see the Democratic Party itself as being the full savior of all of this, right? For some of the limitations that we all know about and that I even have to live with as an elected official. Basically, I think everybody's got to play their role. And it's a lot of these community building organizations, folks like Texas Organizing Project in San Antonio, or Workers Defense Project up in Austin and Dallas, that we need to make sure there's funding for so they go and expand the voter universe. One of the limitations we have as elected officials is our campaign money comes in and people are donating to you to win the next campaign. They're not donating for you to register voters so somebody else can win 6 or 8 years from now. Yeah. Now, some of us try to do some of that, but look, think about how the institution is built. We need to build institutions that are looking towards a longer future, and that's what some of us in elected office need to sort of start boosting up.
Yeah, I mean, labor probably is one of the most consistent ways that you can do that outside of like the 2-year, 4-year election cycle, where you can build labor power and then actively petition even the larger Democratic Party by having some kind of stronghold against that.
And tenant associations and tenant unions too, we're starting those in Texas. Organize your building, organize your workplace. And we do need that independent power, and it moves the party. I mean, you saw a bunch of union leaders here speak, and that's moving the Democratic Party to be less corporate-driven and more worker-driven, and that's good.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, that's sick. What do you, Texas right now apparently is having another power grid failure. 7,000 people are without power, 109 degrees. Like, how do you fix that? What do you do there?
So I have a bill to work on this, and it's called the Connect the Grid Act. See, if you're in most parts of the United States, you're interconnected with other grids. So that if you have a heat wave or a winter storm and your power starts going down, you can pull in power from neighboring states.
Yeah.
It's called the United States of America.
Texas doesn't do that.
Texas is disconnected.
Yeah.
So when we had this giant winter storm, we couldn't pull in power from places where there was sun. With my bill to force the interconnection of the Texas grid, over 80% of those blackouts would have been avoided. And so it's those sorts of ideas that they don't always fall on the left-right spectrum necessarily, but you talk to a normal person, they remember that winter storm in Texas. They go, damn, somebody that actually cares about what's going on with me. And that's part of it. Being progressive, important, but people just thinking you care and you're a good person, they might be okay disagreeing with you about a few things. You know, some of the folks listening here, you and me, we might disagree about some stuff, but if they think, you know what, you're actually just trying, you give about me, then that actually is a huge part of this.
Absolutely. They also probably remember Ted Cruz leaving the state, but they still end up voting for him. How does that work?
Yeah, that's a really good question because he's so unlikable. He is a really, really vulnerable incumbent. I think that it's just a segment of people that are just voting Republican no matter what. And we have such a huge universe of people that are disgusted with him, but don't know that they can make a difference. Yeah. And it's that disbelief in ourselves, I think, that's holding us back.
I mean, same with Mitch McConnell for years and years. I feel like he never had like a real genuine constituency. I've never met a single person that was like, I love Mitch McConnell. And yet he kept winning over and over again because these are like reliable Republican Party voters in a Republican state.
But the arc for that change, I'll tell you real quick, Austin, Texas, which we're talking about as the liberal bastion, George W. Bush won the popular vote in Austin, Texas. So if you think about it, it has now changed to a 70% plus Democratic city. Barack Obama lost to Mitt Romney by 17 points. Joe Biden, it was just 5 points between him and Trump. So I think something else that folks have to remember is like when the civil rights movement was happening,